The year is 1917. A German U-boat captain peers through his periscope at the Atlantic convoy ahead. He's hunted these waters for months, sending dozens of Allied vessels to the bottom. But something makes him pause. The silhouette in his crosshairs looks wrong. Too uniform. Too plain. Too identical to the ship he torpedoed just last week. And the one before that. He doesn't know it yet, but he's looking at the future of warfare, the Industrial Revolution applied to the ocean itself. A revolution that will define how America fights every war for the next century. This is the story of how the United States learned to build ships faster than Germany could sink them, and in doing so, wrote the playbook for the Liberty ships that would save Britain in World War II. By the end of this episode, you'll understand how America went from building 12 ships a year to launching one every 5 days, how an emergency program created in panic became the template for the greatest maritime construction effort in human history, and why the lessons learned between 1917 and 1920 still echo in shipyards today. April 6, 1917. President Woodrow Wilson stands before Congress asking for a declaration of war against Imperial Germany. The vote is almost certain. The Zimmerman telegram has inflamed public opinion. Unrestricted submarine warfare has pushed even the most isolationist senators toward intervention. But Wilson knows something the cheering crowds don't. America is catastrophically unprepared for this war. The U.S. Navy has battleships, yes, impressive dreadnoughts that look powerful in port. But the war in Europe isn't being fought with battleship duels. It's being fought in the gray Atlantic, where German U-boats are massacring merchant vessels faster than Britain can replace them. In April 1917 alone, U-boats will sink over 800,000 tons of Allied shipping. Britain has perhaps 6 weeks of food supplies remaining. The Royal Navy is stretched to breaking point, convoying what ships remain while its own construction yards struggle with steel shortages and labor strikes. Admiral William Sims, sent to London to assess the situation, cables Washington with a single devastating assessment. Britain will lose the war by November unless America can replace the shipping being destroyed, not warships, cargo ships, unglamorous, slow, vulnerable freighters that can carry wheat from Kansas and steel from Pittsburgh to the trenches of France. America's merchant marine in 1917 consists of roughly 2 million tons of ocean-going vessels, respectable for peacetime, utterly inadequate for the war ahead. The United States Maritime Commission will later calculate that America needs at least 9 million additional tons of shipping to supply both its own forces and keep Britain fed. 9 million tons, in a country that built fewer than 200,000 tons of merchant shipping in 1916. The mathematics are brutal. At current construction rates, America won't have the shipping capacity needed until sometime in 1923, 6 years after the war will likely be decided. The problem isn't just quantity, it's the nature of American shipbuilding itself. In 1917, shipbuilding in America is still fundamentally a craft industry. Each vessel is a custom project. Shipyards consult with owners about specific trade routes, cargo types, speed requirements. Naval architects draw up unique plans. Skilled shipwrights interpret those plans, adjusting as they go, solving problems with experience and intuition. A typical cargo ship takes 18 to 24 months from contract to launch. The process is artisanal, bespoke, and completely unsuited to industrial war. Edward Hurley, soon to be appointed head of the Emergency Fleet Corporation, will describe the situation in his memoirs. "We were asking craftsmen to become manufacturers, asking artists to become assembly workers. The United States has approximately 50 shipyards capable of building ocean-going steel vessels. Most are on the East Coast, clustered around traditional maritime centers like Philadelphia, New York, and Newport News. A few are on the Gulf Coast, in Mobile and New Orleans. The West Coast has a handful, serving the Pacific trade. Total building ways, the slipways where ships are actually constructed, number fewer than 200. Each way can produce perhaps one ship every 2 years. The arithmetic is unforgiving. 200 ways times one ship per way every 2 years equals 100 ships annually. America needs to build 9 million tons. The average cargo ship displaces about 7,500 tons. That's 1,200 ships needed. At current rates, 12 years of construction. The war will be over, one way or another, long before that. Congress passes the Shipping Act on September 7, 1916, months before America enters the war, creating the United States Shipping Board to oversee American merchant marine development. But it's the declaration of war that transforms this bureaucratic body into something unprecedented. On April 16, 1917, just 10 days after the declaration of war, President Wilson signs executive order creating the Emergency Fleet Corporation, a subsidiary of the Shipping Board with a single mandate: Build ships as many as possible, as quickly as possible, by any means necessary. Charles Schwab, the steel magnate, will later call it the largest construction program ever attempted by any nation in human history. The initial appropriation is $1.1 billion, an almost incomprehensible sum in 1917, equivalent to roughly $25 billion today. It's more money than the United States has spent on its entire Navy since the founding of the Republic. Edward Hurley takes control of the Emergency Fleet Corporation in July 1917, replacing the first director who proved unable to translate vision into action. Hurley is a businessman, a manufacturing expert who made his fortune in pneumatic machinery. He understands mass production. He understands standardization. He understands that craft must give way to industry. His first action is to convene a meeting of the most prominent naval architects in America: John Metton from Newport News, Theodore Ferris from American International, Henry Howard from Bath Iron Works. Hurley's question to them is simple: can you design a ship that can be built by people who've never built a ship before? The architects are skeptical. Shipbuilding, they explain, requires years of training. Understanding stress loads, hull dynamics, propeller efficiency, these are specialized skills. Hurley cuts them off. I'm not asking if it's traditional, I'm asking if it's possible. What emerges from that meeting and dozens more over the following weeks is a revolutionary concept: the standardized emergency cargo ship. The principle is borrowed from other industries that have already undergone mass production transformation. Henry Ford's Model T, which has brought automobile prices down from $3,000 to under $400 by using interchangeable parts and assembly line techniques. Samuel Colt's revolvers, built with standardized components that can be assembled by semi-skilled workers. The Enfield rifle factories in Britain, which during the Napoleonic Wars pioneered interchangeable parts in firearms manufacturing. The architects understand the theory, but ships present unique challenges. A ship isn't a rifle that weighs 8 pounds or a car that weighs 2,000. A cargo ship weighs 7,500 tons. It's subjected to stresses that vary with every wave, every cargo load, every storm. The tolerances are measured in fractions of inches across structures that span 400 feet. Still, the mandate is clear: design a ship that can be built without highly skilled labor, using materials that are readily available, with components that can be fabricated across the country and assembled at the shipyard. Keep it simple. Keep it standardized. Keep it buildable. Theodore Ferris takes the lead on the design. His firm has experience with cargo vessels for the coastal trade, ships that prioritize cargo capacity and fuel efficiency over speed. The specifications begin to take shape through late summer of 1917. Length overall, approximately 280 feet. Beam, approximately 43 feet. Single-screw propulsion, a propeller design that's less efficient than twin-screw, but far simpler to manufacture and install. Reciprocating steam engine, old-fashioned technology compared to the turbines used on modern vessels, but proven, reliable, and manufacturable by companies that have never built marine engines. Coal-fired boilers, despite oil being more efficient, because coal is abundant in America and doesn't require the specialized bunker designs needed for fuel oil. Cargo capacity, approximately 7,500 deadweight tons, the weight of cargo and fuel a ship can carry. Speed, approximately 11 knots, barely faster than a brisk walk, but sufficient for convoy work and fuel efficient. The design is deliberately archaic. It uses technology from the 1890s, not the 1910s. This isn't because American engineers are backwards. It's because the entire point is to distribute production across America's existing industrial base without requiring retooling or specialized knowledge. The steel plates for the hull can be rolled at any steel mill that produces structural steel for buildings or bridges. The beams and girders can be fabricated at railway car manufacturers or bridge construction companies. The steam engines can be built by firms that make stationary engines for factories or mining operations. The design calls these vessels fabricated ships, a term that emphasizes their modular construction. But within the Emergency Fleet Corporation, another name emerges: standard ships. The designation system is prosaic based on the organizational structure of the Fleet Corporation's design committee. The first design to be finalized is called Design 1013, which becomes the basis for all subsequent emergency construction. The number refers to Design Committee Number 10, Design 13. By late 1917, several variants emerge. Design 1013 is the coal-burning version with reciprocating engines. Design 1022 uses the same hull but with oil-fired boilers. Design 1029 experiments with slightly different cargo hold configurations. Design 10-37 is a modified version for West Coast construction, accommodating the different steel rolling capacities of Pacific mills. Eventually, over 30 different standard designs will be approved, ranging from small coastal freighters of 3,000 tons to large transports of 12,000 tons. But the workhorses, the designs that will define the program, are the original coal burners of approximately 7,500 tons. These will become known simply as standard ships, and later, after the war, as Hog Islanders, after the massive new shipyard built on Hog Island in the Delaware River near Philadelphia, specifically to construct them. The first contracts are awarded in August 1917 to existing shipyards, with deliveries expected beginning in mid-1918. But Edward Hurley knows that existing yards, even working at maximum capacity, can't produce ships fast enough. The Emergency Fleet Corporation needs new yards, built from scratch, designed from the beginning for mass production. This is where the program becomes truly unprecedented. The Fleet Corporation identifies locations across the United States with access to deep water, proximity to steel supplies, and availability of labor. Hog Island, Pennsylvania, a swampy island in the Delaware River downstream from Philadelphia. Bristol, Pennsylvania, another Delaware River site. Newark, New Jersey, on the Passaic River. Wilmington, North Carolina, on the Cape Fear River. Newport News, Virginia, expanding the existing yard. Mobile, Alabama, on the Gulf Coast. Beaumont, Texas, also on the Gulf. Los Angeles, California, creating entirely new facilities on the Pacific. Seattle, Washington, expanding Terminal Island. Portland, Oregon, on the Columbia River. By the end of 1917, the Emergency Fleet Corporation has authorized construction of over 50 new shipyards and massive expansion of another 20 existing facilities. The crown jewel is Hog Island. The contract is awarded to American International Shipbuilding in August 1917. The specifications are staggering. The yard must have 50 building ways, each capable of launching a 7,500-ton ship. It must include all supporting infrastructure, steel fabrication shops, engine assembly buildings, foundries, electrical shops, carpentry shops, paint facilities. It must house and feed 35,000 workers. It must be operational by spring 1918. On a swampy island that is currently home to nothing but reeds and mosquitoes. The construction of Hog Island alone costs over $65 million, more than the entire United States had spent on shipbuilding in any previous year. The workforce attacking the swamp is nearly as large as the workforce that will eventually build ships there. Pile drivers hammer foundation posts into the mud 24 hours a day. Dredges deepen the river channels. Concrete is poured for building foundations at a rate of over 10,000 cubic yards per week. Electric power lines are strung from Philadelphia. A railroad spur is built to bring in steel and equipment. Worker housing goes up in record time, entire neighborhoods of temporary barracks and mess halls. The man overseeing this controlled chaos is Charles P.S., formerly of the Link Belt Company, a manufacturing firm known for its efficiency systems. P.S. applies industrial engineering principles to every aspect of the yard's design. The layout is meticulously planned to minimize material movement. Steel arrives by rail on the western side of the island, moves through fabrication shops in sequence, and emerges on the eastern side as completed hull sections ready for assembly on the ways. The building ways themselves are revolutionary. Traditional shipyards place ways perpendicular to the waterfront, launching ships sideways into the water. Hog Island uses longitudinal ways, with ships pointed bow first toward the water, allowing longer slipways and more efficient construction sequences. Each way is equipped with overhead cranes running the full length, lifting sections weighing up to 30 tons into position. The welding of hull sections, still a relatively new technique in American shipbuilding, is standardized. Templates ensure that sections fabricated in different shops will fit together precisely when brought to the ways. This is the essence of mass production translated to ships. A hull plate made in Shop 7 will fit exactly into the position designed for it in Ship 32 on Way 14. Assembled by workers who may never have seen that particular plate before it arrives at their station. The engines are even more modular. The Emergency Fleet Corporation contracts with over 200 firms to build standard ship engines, from established marine engine manufacturers like Bethlehem Steel and New York Shipbuilding to companies that have never built a marine engine, like the Pittsburgh Forge and Iron Company and the Manitowoc Shipbuilding Company in Wisconsin. The engines are built in sections. Bed plates, cylinder assemblies, crankshafts, valve gear, condensers, each component fabricated to exact specifications that ensure any engine from any manufacturer will bolt into any standard ship hull. The boilers are similarly standardized, built by firms across the country from identical designs. The logistical choreography required to make this system work is unprecedented in American industrial history. By early 1918, the Emergency Fleet Corporation is coordinating production across over 1,500 separate contractors. Steel mills in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Illinois are rolling hull plates to standard ship specifications. Forges in Massachusetts and Connecticut are producing propeller shafts. Foundries in Wisconsin are casting engine components. Electrical manufacturers in New York are building generators and switchboards. Rope makers in Boston are producing cables and hawsers. Even furniture manufacturers in North Carolina are building wooden furniture for officers' quarters and crew mess halls. Every component must arrive at the right shipyard at the right time. A delay in crankshaft delivery can idle an entire building way. An overproduction of hull plates can overwhelm storage capacity. The Fleet Corporation establishes a priority system, borrowed from railroad scheduling practices, that assigns every component a routing number indicating its destination yard and required delivery date. The United States Railroad Administration, which has taken control of the nation's railroads for the war effort, gives standard ship materials priority routing, second only to military equipment being shipped to ports for transport to France. Rail cars marked with the Emergency Fleet Corporation's distinctive blue star move to the front of every yard, every classification point, every junction. The scale of material movement is staggering. Hog Island alone, at peak construction, receives over 400 railroad cars of material daily. That's one car every 3.5 minutes, 24 hours a day. Each car must be unloaded, its contents verified against shipping manifests, and the material moved to the correct shop or storage area. The Fleet Corporation creates an entirely new logistics system called the Routing and Progress Method, which tracks every major component from the moment its contract is awarded through fabrication, shipping, and final installation. Progress clerks at each shipyard send daily telegrams to the Fleet Corporation's headquarters in Washington, reporting completions, delays, and material requirements. This information is compiled into master charts that cover entire walls at headquarters, showing the status of every ship under construction at every yard in America. By spring 1918, the first standard ships are approaching completion. Hog Island launches its first vessel, the Quistconck, on August 5, 1918, almost exactly 1 year after construction of the yard began. The name follows the Fleet Corporation's naming convention for standard ships. Native American words, selected alphabetically by building sequence. The Quistconck is followed by the Raboon, the Sakarapa, the Tianesta, the Uxbridge. The launches come slowly at first, one every few weeks as construction. Crews learn the new methods and work out the inevitable problems, but the learning curve is steep. By October 1918, Hog Island is launching a ship every 4 days. Other yards are hitting their stride as well. Bristol launches its first ship in September. Newark in October. The West Coast yards, which started construction later, are coming online through the fall. The speed of construction is transforming. The first standard ship, built at an existing yard using traditional methods while the design was still being finalized, took 18 months from keel laying to launch. Ships being built at Hog Island in late 1918 are being completed in less than 6 months from keel to delivery. The most efficient yards will eventually reduce this to under 4 months. This represents a revolution in construction speed, but it's achieved through methods that would horrify traditional shipbuilders. The quality is adequate, not exceptional. The ships are built to minimum specifications, not optimal ones. They're designed for perhaps 5 years of service, not the 20 or 30 years expected of a conventionally built merchant ship. Welding is used extensively in the superstructure and deck fittings, but the critical hull structure still uses riveted construction because the Fleet Corporation doesn't trust welded seams for the stress loads experienced by a ship's hull in heavy seas. This conservative approach will later be validated when Liberty ships in World War II, which do use welded hulls, experience catastrophic hull failures in cold North Atlantic waters. The workforce required for this production surge is drawn from across American society in ways that prefigure the industrial mobilization of World War II. The Emergency Fleet Corporation, desperate for workers, actively recruits women for shipyard work, one of the first major American industries to do so on a large scale. By late 1918, approximately 20% of the workforce at Hog Island is female. Women work as welders, as crane operators, as template fitters, as progress clerks, as material handlers. The Fleet Corporation commissions a publicity campaign featuring Wendy the Welder, a cartoon character depicted in overalls and welding helmet, encouraging women to join the shipbuilding effort. The actual working conditions for these women are harsh. Shipyards are dangerous, noisy, and physically demanding. The work involves heavy lifting, working at heights, exposure to welding flash, and long shifts in all weather. But the pay is good by the standards of 1918, approximately $4 per day for skilled positions. nearly double what women could earn in textile mills or domestic service. The Fleet Corporation also recruits heavily among African American workers, offering wages and positions that are unprecedented in an era of severe occupational segregation. Black workers at Hog Island work alongside white workers in the same shops, though social separation is maintained in housing and dining facilities. The recruiting extends internationally, bringing in experienced shipwrights from Britain and Canada to serve as foremen and trainers. The training programs established by the Fleet Corporation are themselves innovative. New workers attend brief courses, typically 2 to 4 weeks, learning a single specific skill: how to drive rivets, how to read templates, how to operate a particular type of crane, how to run welding beads on flat plate. The training is focused and practical, with almost no theoretical content. Workers learn by doing, under the supervision of experienced foremen, with the expectation that they'll achieve adequate proficiency within their first month on the job. This approach to rapid workforce development will be studied and replicated by American industry for decades, becoming the foundation for the War Production Board's training programs in World War II. The human cost of this rapid construction is significant. Shipyards are inherently dangerous, and the pressure to build quickly with inexperienced workers leads to accident rates that would be unacceptable in peacetime. The Fleet Corporation's own statistics compiled after the war show that shipyard accidents during peak production in late 1918 are occurring at a rate of approximately 1 lost time injury per 10,000 worker hours. With 35,000 workers at Hog Island working 10-hour shifts, that's roughly 3 serious injuries every day at that single yard. Fatal accidents occur several times per month across the Fleet Corporation's network of yards. Workers fall from scaffolding, are struck by crane loads, are burned in welding accidents, are crushed between hull sections being positioned. The Fleet Corporation establishes safety departments at each major yard, an innovation in industrial practice, but the fundamental tension between speed and safety is never fully resolved. By November 1918, when the armistice ends the fighting in Europe, the Emergency Fleet Corporation has delivered approximately 100 completed standard ships, with another 300 in various stages of construction. It's an impressive achievement, but it's also too late. The United States entered the war with a shipping deficit of roughly 7 million tons. By the armistice, that deficit has been reduced to approximately 4 million tons, partly through American construction, but primarily through reduced losses as the convoy system and improved anti-submarine techniques make U-boat operations increasingly costly for Germany. The standard ships that do reach service before the armistice prove their worth. They're slow, unglamorous, and uncomfortable, but they carry cargo reliably across the Atlantic. The coal-burning propulsion, derided by many naval architects as obsolete, proves advantageous in the convoy system because coal burners can be refueled at any port, while oil burners require specialized bunkering facilities that are scarce in war-ravaged Europe. The true test of the standard ship program, however, comes not during the war, but after it. When the armistice is signed, the Emergency Fleet Corporation faces a crisis. Hundreds of ships are under construction, representing an investment of over $2 billion. Thousands of workers are employed at the new yards. Contracts have been signed with suppliers across the country. Does the program continue or does it stop? The decision is made to continue construction on all ships that are more than 50% complete and to finish construction of the new yards that are near completion. The reasoning is partly economic, the invested capital should produce something, and partly strategic, believing that a large merchant marine will be valuable for America's post-war commerce. This decision means that standard ship construction will actually peak not during the war but after it. Through 1919 and into 1920, ships continue to slide down the ways at Hog Island, at Bristol, at Newark, at the West Coast yards. By the time the program finally winds down in early 1921, the Emergency Fleet Corporation has delivered approximately 550 standard ships, representing over 4 million tons of shipping. It's an extraordinary achievement, transforming America from a minor player in merchant shipbuilding to the world's largest shipbuilding nation in less than 4 years. But it's also an economic disaster. The cost per ship, when all the expenses of building new yards and training new workers are factored in, is approximately $3 million per vessel, roughly double the pre-war cost of a comparable ship built by conventional methods. The market for these ships in peacetime is limited. They're too slow for competitive commercial routes. Their coal-burning propulsion is increasingly obsolete as the maritime industry shifts to oil. Their Spartan construction, designed for a 5-year wartime lifespan, makes them unattractive to operators planning for long-term service. The United States government finds itself owning hundreds of ships that private operators don't want to buy at any price that would recoup construction costs. The Emergency Fleet Corporation tries various schemes to dispose of the vessels. Some are sold at deep discounts to American shipping companies with government-backed loans to sweeten the deal. Some are chartered to operators on favorable terms. Some are simply laid up in reserve fleets, anchored in backwaters like the James River in Virginia and the Suisun Bay in California, waiting for a market that never materializes. By 1925, many of the standard ships are being scrapped, barely 5 years after their completion. The steel is sold for a fraction of the original construction cost. It's a financial catastrophe, one of the most expensive peacetime government programs in American history to that point. Congressional investigations in the early 1920s will be scathing, with accusations of waste, mismanagement, and corruption, yet the program's legacy extends far beyond the balance sheets. The Emergency Fleet Corporation's Standard Ship Program created an industrial infrastructure and a body of institutional knowledge that would prove invaluable 20 years later when America faced an even more desperate shipping crisis. Consider the technical legacy. The standardized engine designs developed for standard ships became the basis for marine engine production throughout the 1920s and 30s. The modular construction techniques, the use of templates and jigs, the methods for training semi-skilled workers, all of these were studied and refined by American shipyards in the interwar period. When the Liberty Ship program was conceived in 1940, the designers didn't start from scratch. They started with the standard ship designs, updating them with welded construction and modern diesel engines, but retaining the fundamental principle: a simple, standardized vessel that could be built by inexperienced workers using widely available materials. The Maritime Commission engineers who designed the Liberty ships in 1940 and 1941 had access to the complete records of the Emergency Fleet Corporation. They studied the construction times, the bottlenecks, the material flow problems, the training methods. They learned from the failures as much as from the successes. The physical infrastructure also endured. Hog Island itself was dismantled after the war, its building ways torn up and sold for scrap, its shops converted to other industrial uses. But many of the other yards built by the Emergency Fleet Corporation remained operational. The yard at Bristol, Pennsylvania became the nucleus of the Merchant Shipbuilding Corporation, which built destroyers for the Navy in World War II. The Newark Yard became Federal Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company, which built cruisers and aircraft carriers. The West Coast yards, particularly those in Portland and Seattle, became major centers of shipbuilding that continue to operate today. Perhaps most importantly, the Standard Ship Program created a generation of managers, engineers, and skilled workers who understood mass production shipbuilding. Charles P., who managed Hog Island, became a consultant to the Maritime Commission in the 1930s. Dozens of the engineers and foremen who worked on standard ships moved into positions of authority in American shipyards during the interwar years. When World War II began and America needed to mobilize its shipbuilding industry again, these men provided the institutional memory that made rapid expansion possible. The training methods developed by the Emergency Fleet Corporation were extensively documented and became the foundation for industrial training programs across American manufacturing. The quick training approach, focused on teaching specific skills rather than comprehensive knowledge, was adopted by automobile manufacturers, aircraft plants, and munitions factories during World War II. The concept of breaking down complex tasks into simple, teachable operations, which the Fleet Corporation applied to shipbuilding, became a cornerstone of American industrial practice. The statistical and logistical systems developed to track material and production across hundreds of contractors were studied by business schools and management consultants throughout the 1920s. The routing and progress method pioneered by the Fleet Corporation was adapted for use in other industries. The priority scheduling system influenced how American railroads managed freight during peacetime. The central control room approach, with its wall-sized charts tracking every ship under construction, became a model for production control in other large-scale manufacturing efforts. Even the failures provided valuable lessons. The hull fractures that occurred on several standard ships in heavy weather, caused by inadequate bracing of the cargo holds, led to improved structural analysis methods that were incorporated into all subsequent ship designs. The engine vibration problems that plagued some of the vessels built by inexperienced engine manufacturers led to better quality control procedures and more rigorous testing protocols. The fact that so many standard ships proved uneconomical in peacetime service led to a better understanding of the life cycle costs of ships, influencing how the Maritime Commission approached ship design in the 1930s. The political legacy was equally significant. The Emergency Fleet Corporation demonstrated that the United States government could successfully manage a massive industrial program when national security required it. The model of a government corporation, operating with private sector efficiency but public sector resources, was studied extensively in the 1930s as the Roosevelt administration sought tools to address the Depression. The Tennessee Valley Authority, the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, and other New Deal agencies drew on the Fleet Corporation's example. The program also demonstrated the potential for rapid industrial mobilization, a lesson that influenced American strategic planning throughout the interwar period. Military planners, studying how America had gone from building 12 ships per year to launching one every few days, concluded that American industrial capacity could be mobilized much more rapidly than traditional military planning assumed. This understanding influenced decisions about the size of the peacetime military, with planners accepting smaller standing forces on the assumption that industry could rapidly expand to meet wartime needs. This assumption would be validated in World War II, when American industry achieved production levels that were inconceivable in 1941. By 1943, American shipyards were launching Liberty ships faster than standard ships had been launched at the peak of the World War I program. The Kaiser shipyards on the West Coast, using methods pioneered at Hog Island and refined over 2 decades, built Liberty ships in an average of 42 days from keel to launch. The record, set by the Richmond, California yard, was less than 5 days from keel laying to launch for the SS Robert E. Peary. The connection between standard ships and Liberty ships is direct and documented. Henry Kaiser, whose shipbuilding empire dominated World War II production, studied the Emergency Fleet Corporation's methods extensively before bidding on Maritime commission contracts. The yard layouts he designed for Richmond and Vancouver, Washington deliberately mimicked the flow patterns pioneered at Hog Island. The prefabrication techniques, the use of traveling cranes, the modular assembly of hull sections, all descended directly from World War I practice. The Maritime Commission's training films for World War II shipyard workers were updated versions of training materials originally created by the Emergency Fleet Corporation. Even some of the specific jigs and templates used in Liberty ship construction were direct descendants of tooling designed for standard ships, updated for welded construction but fundamentally unchanged in concept. The personnel connections were equally direct. Admiral Howard Vickery, who oversaw Liberty ship production as vice chairman of the Maritime Commission, had served as a junior naval officer assigned to the Emergency Fleet Corporation during World War I. His experience watching the standard ship program convinced him that mass production shipbuilding was possible. Admiral Emory Land, chairman of the Maritime Commission, had also observed the Fleet Corporation's work as a young naval constructor. When they designed the Liberty ship program, they consciously applied lessons learned from both the successes and failures of the standard ship effort. The scale of the two programs invites comparison. The Emergency Fleet Corporation built approximately 550 standard ships over 4 years, representing about 4 million tons of shipping. The Maritime Commission and Warshipping Administration built over 2,700 Liberty ships, plus hundreds of Victory ships and other standardized types representing over 30 million tons of shipping in roughly the same time period. The World War II program was 6 to 7 times larger than the World War I effort, yet the fundamental principles were identical. Standardized designs that could be built by inexperienced workers, modular construction with prefabricated components, distributed manufacturing across multiple contractors, rapid training focused on specific skills rather than comprehensive knowledge, central coordination of materials and scheduling. The difference was not in concept but in execution, refined through 2 decades of learning and improvement. Consider the construction timeline progression. The first standard ships, built in 1917 and early 1918, took an average of 12 to 18 months from keel to delivery. By late 1918, this had been reduced to 4 to 6 months. The first Liberty ships, built in 1941, took an average of 8 to 9 months. By 1943, this had been reduced to 6 weeks, with exceptional yards achieving construction in less than 2 weeks. The learning curve was similar but steeper in World War II, because the foundation had already been laid in World War I. The workforce mobilization followed similar patterns. The Emergency Fleet Corporation employed approximately 380,000 workers at peak in late 1918. The World War II shipbuilding program employed over 1.7 million workers at peak in 1943. Both programs recruited heavily among women and minorities. Both used rapid training methods. Both faced similar challenges with workplace safety and labor relations. The difference was that World War II managers could learn from World War I mistakes, implementing better safety programs and more effective training from the beginning. The material logistics were comparable in complexity but vastly larger in scale. The Emergency Fleet Corporation coordinated approximately 1,500 contractors. The Maritime Commission coordinated over 12,000. Both used priority scheduling and central tracking systems. Both faced bottlenecks in critical materials, particularly steel plate and propulsion machinery. The solutions were similar: expanding production capacity, finding substitute materials, and ruthlessly prioritizing the most critical components. The quality issues mirror each other as well. Standard ships were built to minimum specifications and had numerous problems in service. Hull leaks, engine failures, steering malfunctions, and electrical problems were common. Liberty ships had similar issues, plus the added problem of catastrophic hull fractures in cold water caused by the transition to welded construction. Both programs accepted these quality problems as the price of rapid construction, calculating that having ships in service, even unreliable ones, was better than having no ships at all. The international context of the standard ship program reveals another dimension of its significance. When the United States entered World War I, Britain was the world's dominant shipbuilding nation, with yards on the Clyde, the Tyne, the Mersey, and Belfast producing the majority of the world's merchant tonnage. British shipbuilders viewed American entry into shipbuilding with a mixture of skepticism and alarm. Skepticism because British yards had centuries of tradition and expertise that Americans lacked. Alarm because American industrial capacity, once mobilized, threatened to disrupt the established order of global shipbuilding. The British Admiralty initially resisted American shipbuilding plans, arguing that steel and skilled labor would be better used producing munitions and military equipment rather than attempting to build ships in a country with limited maritime construction experience. Lord Peary, chairman of Harland and Wolff, the massive Belfast shipyard, testified before the British War Cabinet that American shipyards would require at least 3 years to achieve production levels that would meaningfully contribute to Allied shipping needs. He was simultaneously correct and completely wrong. Correct that American yards struggled initially with quality and delivery schedules. Wrong that this learning period would prevent significant production. The sheer scale of American mobilization, the willingness to invest billions of dollars and employ hundreds of thousands of workers, overwhelmed the technical deficiencies through brute force industrial capacity. British attitudes shifted as standard ships began appearing in convoy service in late 1918. Royal Navy convoy commodores, initially disdainful of the slow, coal-burning American vessels, grudgingly admitted they performed their function adequately. A report from Rear Admiral Lewis Clinton Baker, commanding convoy operations from Liverpool, noted that standard ships lack the refinement of proper merchant vessels but steam reliably and have suffered no higher rate of mechanical failure than vessels from established yards. This was faint praise but represented an acknowledgement that American mass production methods could produce serviceable ships. The real impact of the standard ship program on British thinking came after the war, when British shipyards faced devastating competition from government-subsidized American vessels. The United States Shipping Board, desperate to dispose of hundreds of standard ships, sold them to American operators at prices far below construction cost and chartered them on terms that British operators could not match. British shipping companies found themselves competing against vessels that were essentially being given away by the American government. The political backlash in Britain was intense. The British Shipbuilding Federation demanded protective tariffs and restrictions on American shipping. The Trades Union Congress, representing shipyard workers facing unemployment as orders dried up, organized protests and strikes. The British government, caught between the interests of shipbuilders and the needs of the broader economy, attempted to negotiate shipping agreements with the United States that would limit the impact of standard ships on British maritime trade. These negotiations, conducted throughout the early 1920s, revealed the changed balance of power in global shipbuilding. Before World War I, Britain built ships and America bought them. After the war, America had the capacity to build its own ships and potentially compete for international orders. The fact that American shipbuilding was currently uneconomical, requiring massive subsidies, was less important than the demonstrated potential. Britain could no longer take its maritime dominance for granted. The Japanese response to the standard ship program was even more significant for the long term. Japan, which had been building up its shipbuilding capacity since the Russo-Japanese War of 1905, watched American mobilization closely. Japanese naval observers visited American yards, including Hog Island, and reported extensively on the methods being employed. The Japanese Naval Construction Bureau produced detailed studies of American production techniques, particularly interested in the approaches to training and quality control. These studies influenced Japanese shipbuilding policy throughout the 1920s and 30s. When Japan began its own emergency shipbuilding program in the late 1930s, preparing for war with China and potentially with Western powers, the designs explicitly drew on lessons learned from American standard ship construction. Japanese standard cargo ships, designated with A and B type classifications, used simplified construction methods and modular components that directly paralleled American practice. The irony would become apparent in World War II, when American Liberty ships faced Japanese A-type cargo ships, both descended from the same standard ship lineage. The European continental response was more limited, constrained by the economic devastation of the war. France, which had lost much of its northern industrial base to German occupation, lacked the resources for major shipbuilding expansion. Germany, its fleet scuttled at Scapa Flow and its shipbuilding industry constrained by Versailles Treaty limitations, was effectively removed from merchant shipbuilding competition for a decade. Italy and the Netherlands maintained their pre-war shipbuilding industries but did not attempt to match American or British production scales. The most important European observer of the standard ship program was arguably the Soviet Union. Bolshevik industrial planners developing the first five-year plan in the late 1920s studied American mass production methods extensively. The standard ship program, along with Ford's automobile plants and American steel mills, became models for Soviet industrial development. Soviet shipyards in the 1930s would attempt to apply standardized construction methods to their own emergency ship programs, with mixed success due to the less developed Soviet industrial base. The economic impact of the standard ship program extended beyond shipbuilding itself, influencing American industrial structure for decades. The massive steel consumption of the program, approximately 3 million tons of steel plate annually at peak production, drove expansion of American steel rolling capacity. Mills built new plate rolling equipment to serve the Emergency Fleet Corporation, and this equipment remained after the war, available for other uses. The expansion of American steel plate production capacity in World War I was directly responsible for the rapid growth of American skyscraper construction in the 1920s. The steel frame towers of New York, Chicago, and other cities were built using mills and equipment originally expanded to produce standard ship hulls. The electrical equipment industry experienced similar expansion. The generators, motors, switchboards, and wiring required for standard ships drove production increases that exceeded shipboard needs. This expanded capacity enabled the electrification programs of the 1920s, bringing electric power to American farms and small towns. The connection between wartime shipbuilding and peacetime rural electrification, seemingly unrelated, runs through the industrial mobilization of 1917 and 1918. The propulsion equipment manufacturers provide another example of lasting impact. The hundreds of companies that built standard ship engines, boilers, and auxiliary machinery created a much larger base of firms with marine engineering experience. While many returned to their pre-war products after the war, some continued in marine work, diversifying the American marine equipment industry. This diversified supplier base would prove crucial in World War II, when even greater numbers of marine engines and boilers were needed. The machine tool industry, which supplied the lathes, drills, planers, and other equipment used in shipyard shops, experienced explosive growth serving the Emergency Fleet Corporation. The machine tools purchased for standard ship construction remained in American industrial hands after the war, upgrading the technological sophistication of American manufacturing generally. Historians of American industrial development have traced the productivity improvements of the 1920s partly to this infusion of modern machine tools during the war. The financial mechanisms developed to fund the standard ship program also had lasting influence. The Emergency Fleet Corporation's use of government-backed loans to encourage private investment became a model for subsequent government industrial programs. The Reconstruction Finance Corporation in the 1930s and the Defense Plant Corporation in World War II both used similar financing structures, blending public funding with private operation. The accounting and auditing systems developed to track the billions of dollars flowing through the Fleet Corporation influenced government contracting procedures for decades. The complexity of managing thousands of contracts simultaneously, ensuring proper accounting while maintaining production speed, forced the development of new administrative techniques. These techniques, documented in Emergency Fleet Corporation manuals and regulations, were studied by government agencies and private corporations alike. The use of cost-plus contracting, where contractors were reimbursed for costs plus a fixed profit percentage, became standard for government emergency procurement, used extensively in World War II, and continuing in modified forms in defense contracting today. This approach, controversial because it removes the incentive for contractors to control costs, was pioneered at scale in the standard ship program. The labor relations legacy of the standard ship program is more ambiguous. The Emergency Fleet Corporation generally recognized unions and bargained collectively, setting precedents for government acceptance of organized labor in defense industries. However, the corporation also used its wartime authority to restrict strikes and impose arbitration, establishing patterns of government intervention in labor disputes that unions would find constraining in later years. The extensive employment of women in shipyards during World War I created expectations that these opportunities would continue after the war. They did not. Almost all women shipyard workers were laid off in 1919 and 1920 as production wound down and men returned from military service. The yards returned to their pre-war patterns of male-only employment in most positions, yet the memory of women's effective performance in shipyard work during the war provided ammunition for advocates of expanded women's employment in World War II. When Kaiser and other shipbuilders recruited women workers in 1942, they explicitly referenced the World War I precedent, arguing that women had proven their capability in shipyards a generation earlier. Similarly, the relatively integrated work environment in standard shipyards, where black and white workers performed similar jobs in the same shops, created a precedent that was referenced, if not fully followed, in World War II. The employment patterns established by the Emergency Fleet Corporation, treating shipbuilding as an industrial job that could be performed by anyone with brief training rather than a craft requiring long apprenticeship, helped break down some of the racial barriers that had excluded black workers from skilled industrial employment. The progress was limited and often reversed in the post-war period, but the precedent existed and could be invoked by civil rights advocates in later decades. The geographic distribution of the standard ship program also had lasting effects on American industrial geography. The massive yards built on the Gulf Coast, particularly in Mobile and Beaumont, brought heavy industry to a region that had been primarily agricultural. The infrastructure built to support these yards, the improved ports, the rail connections, the worker housing, the utilities, remained after the war and enabled subsequent industrial development. The Gulf Coast's emergence as a petrochemical center in the mid-20th century was facilitated by the industrial foundation laid during World War I shipbuilding. The West Coast yards had even greater long-term impact. Before World War I, West Coast shipbuilding was minimal, serving only local needs. The Emergency Fleet Corporation's decision to build major yards in Seattle, Portland, Oakland, and Los Angeles transformed the Pacific Coast into a major shipbuilding center. These yards, maintained and expanded through the interwar period, became the foundation for World War II production that would eclipse East Coast output. The dominance of West Coast shipyards in World War II, particularly Kaiser's operations, was built on the foundation of yards initially constructed for standard ship production. The technical education establishment in America also felt the impact of the standard ship program. Engineering schools, observing the success of rapid training methods and standardized design approaches, began incorporating industrial engineering and production management into their curricula. The traditional focus on theoretical engineering principles was supplemented with practical courses on manufacturing methods, industrial organization, and production control. This shift, beginning in the 1920s, produced a generation of engineers better prepared for industrial management, contributing to American industrial leadership in the mid-20th century. The naval architecture profession underwent similar evolution. Before World War I, naval architects focused primarily on optimizing individual ship designs for specific purposes. The standard ship program demonstrated that standardization and simplified design could be valuable in their own right, even at the cost of some performance. This lesson influenced naval architecture education and practice, creating a subspecialty in standardized ship design that would flourish in World War II and continue in commercial shipbuilding. The concept of design for manufacture, consciously simplifying designs to ease production, became a recognized principle in naval architecture, traced directly to the standard ship experience. The program's documentation legacy deserves mention as well. The Emergency Fleet Corporation produced thousands of technical drawings, specifications, construction manuals, and operational reports. This documentation was preserved in government archives and became an invaluable resource for future shipbuilders. When Liberty ships were being designed, Maritime Commission engineers had access to complete standard ship records, allowing them to learn from both successes and failures without repeating the entire development process. Today, more than a century after the first standard ship slid down the ways, their legacy remains visible in unexpected places. Only a handful of the original vessels survive physically. Most were scrapped in the 1920s and 30s, their steel recycled into buildings, bridges, and automobiles. A few served through World War II, pressed into emergency service once again, and were finally broken up in the late 1940s. But the physical ships are less important than what they represented and what they taught. In modern shipyards, the principles pioneered in the standard ship program remain fundamental. Modular construction, where sections are fabricated in shops and assembled on the building way, is now universal practice. The use of computer-aided design has made standardization even more precise, but the concept of designing ships for efficient production rather than optimal performance alone traces directly to 1917. Contemporary container ships, cruise vessels, and naval combatants are all designed with manufacturability in mind, balancing performance requirements against production efficiency in ways that the Emergency Fleet Corporation would recognize. The legacy is perhaps most visible in military shipbuilding, where the need to rapidly expand production in wartime remains a planning consideration. The United States Navy's current shipbuilding strategy includes provisions for surge production, the ability to rapidly increase construction rates in an emergency. The plans for implementing surge production, developed by the Naval Sea Systems Command, explicitly reference the Standard Ship and Liberty Ship programs as historical examples of successful rapid mobilization. The assumption underlying these plans is that American shipyards, given sufficient resources and authority, could repeat the achievement of 1917 to 1920 or 1940 to 1945. Whether this assumption remains valid in the 21st century, with a much smaller shipbuilding industrial base, is debatable. But the fact that military planners still look to the Standard Ship program as a model demonstrates its enduring influence. Commercial shipbuilding has largely moved to Asia, with China, South Korea, and Japan dominating world production. Yet even these shipyards apply principles developed in the American emergency programs of the World Wars. The massive shipyards of Hyundai Heavy Industries in Ulsan, Korea, which can build a container ship in months using highly standardized designs and modular construction, are the direct descendants of the production methods pioneered at Hog Island. The floating dry docks, the overhead cranes, the sequential fabrication shops, the emphasis on worker training and standardized procedures, all echo the innovations of the Emergency Fleet Corporation. The educational institutions that train maritime professionals continue to teach the Standard Ship program as a case study. The United States Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point includes the Emergency Fleet Corporation's history in its curriculum on maritime logistics and ship production. Naval architecture programs at MIT, University of Michigan, and Webb Institute analyze standard ship designs as examples of engineering compromises made under extreme constraints. Business schools study the program as an example of large-scale project management and rapid organizational scaling. The lessons extracted from the Standard Ship experience extend beyond shipbuilding. The program is studied by military logistics planners as an example of industrial mobilization. It's examined by economists interested in the relationship between government investment and industrial capacity. It's analyzed by historians of technology studying how innovation occurs under crisis conditions. The fundamental tension at the heart of the program, the conflict between craft tradition and industrial efficiency, between quality and quantity, between optimal design and rapid production, these tensions exist in many fields beyond shipbuilding. The way the Emergency Fleet Corporation resolved these tensions, generally favoring speed and quantity over quality and optimization, provides a model for how such decisions can be made under extreme time pressure. The program also offers lessons about the limits of crash industrialization, the economic waste of the Standard Ship program, the billions of dollars spent to build ships that were obsolete before completion and worthless shortly after delivery, demonstrates that rapid mobilization comes with high costs. The contemporary debate about maintaining industrial capacity during peacetime versus accepting the cost of emergency mobilization during crises often references the Standard Ship experience. Is it cheaper to maintain a large shipbuilding industry during peacetime, accepting the ongoing expense, or to accept that wartime mobilization will be expensive and wasteful but achieve necessary results? The Standard Ship program suggests that emergency mobilization can achieve extraordinary quantitative results, but at very high per-unit costs and with significant economic dislocation afterward. The program's influence on American strategic culture should not be underestimated. The demonstration that American industrial capacity could be mobilized to overwhelming effect in a relatively short time contributed to a confidence, some would say overconfidence, in American ability to outproduce any adversary. This confidence influenced American decisions to enter World War II, with military and political leaders assured that American industry would provide the material advantage needed for victory. The same confidence influenced Cold War strategy, with American planners assuming that industrial mobilization capability provided a strategic reserve that could overwhelm Soviet numerical advantages in conventional forces. Whether such confidence remains justified in the 21st century is questionable. The American industrial base is fundamentally different than it was in 1917 or 1941. Shipbuilding capacity is a fraction of World War II levels. Steel production has declined. The network of machine tool manufacturers, component suppliers, and skilled workers that enabled rapid mobilization no longer exists in the same form. Yet the memory of past achievement remains powerful in American strategic thinking. The assumption that American industry can scale rapidly to meet any challenge, an assumption built substantially on the Standard Ship and Liberty Ship experiences, continues to influence policy decisions about military readiness and industrial preparedness. The Standard Ship program also offers insights into the relationship between democracy and industrial mobilization. The Emergency Fleet Corporation operated during a period of extreme executive authority, with Congress providing massive funding and broad discretion to a government corporation that operated largely without direct oversight. The waste and inefficiency that inevitably resulted from this arrangement led to political backlash in the post-war period, but the program achieved its fundamental objective of rapidly creating a large merchant fleet. The tension between efficiency and accountability, between the need for rapid action and the requirement for democratic oversight, remains unresolved. The Standard Ship experience suggests that rapid mobilization may require accepting some loss of accountability and some economic waste in exchange for achieving necessary results quickly. In the specific context of shipbuilding, the Standard Ship program's most important legacy may be the demonstration that shipbuilding can be treated as mass manufacturing rather than craft production. This insight, revolutionary in 1917, is now conventional wisdom. Modern shipyards are factories that happen to build floating structures rather than land-based ones. The application of industrial engineering principles to shipbuilding, the use of standardized designs and modular construction, the emphasis on supply chain management and production control, these are now fundamental to the industry worldwide. The Emergency Fleet Corporation did not invent these concepts, but it demonstrated their viability at a scale that could not be ignored. For the individuals involved, the Standard Ship program was a transformative experience. The hundreds of thousands of workers who built the ships, many of whom had never worked in heavy industry before, acquired skills and confidence that influenced their subsequent lives. The managers and engineers who learned to organize production on an unprecedented scale went on to leadership positions in American industry. The government officials who administered the program developed expertise in industrial mobilization that would prove valuable in subsequent crises. The social mixing that occurred in the shipyards, bringing together people from different regions, classes, and backgrounds, contributed to the gradual breakdown of social barriers that characterized American society in the 20th century. For America as a nation, the Standard Ship program was a coming of age in industrial terms. The United States entered World War I as a nation with enormous economic potential but limited industrial achievement in many fields. The country emerged from the war with demonstrated capability in complex industrial production, with infrastructure and expertise that had not existed before. The transformation was not limited to shipbuilding but extended across American industry. The confidence gained from successfully executing the Standard Ship program, despite all its problems and costs, influenced American willingness to undertake other ambitious industrial projects in subsequent decades. From the Tennessee Valley Authority to the Interstate Highway System to the Apollo program, the belief that America could accomplish seemingly impossible industrial and engineering feats through focused effort and adequate resources can be traced partly to the Standard Ship experience. The program demonstrated that America's greatest strategic resource was not raw materials or territory but industrial capacity and organizational ability. This understanding would shape American strategy throughout the 20th century and into the 21st. The ability to mobilize industrial capacity rapidly, to organize production on a massive scale, to innovate under pressure, these became defining characteristics of American power. The Standard ships themselves, those coal-burning, slow-steaming vessels that seemed obsolete almost from the moment of their launch, were less important than what their construction represented about American industrial potential. The closing of the last Standard shipbuilding yard in 1921 did not end the program's influence. Every subsequent emergency mobilization, every rapid industrial expansion, every attempt to scale production quickly has drawn on lessons learned between 1917 and 1920. The specific techniques have evolved with technology. Computer-aided design has replaced paper templates. Welding has largely replaced riveting. Diesel and gas turbines have replaced coal-fired reciprocating engines. But the fundamental principles remain constant. Standardized designs to enable distributed production. Train workers quickly in specific skills rather than waiting for comprehensive expertise to develop. Organize supply chains to deliver the right materials to the right place at the right time. Accept that rapid production will involve higher costs and lower quality than optimized peacetime production. but that speed and quantity have their own value. These lessons, learned at such high cost in the standard ship program, have been passed down through generations of engineers, managers, and planners. They are taught in universities, documented in technical manuals, embedded in organizational cultures. They represent a form of industrial knowledge that goes beyond any specific technology or technique, encompassing understanding of how human organizations can accomplish extraordinary things under extraordinary pressure. The standard ships are gone, scrapped decades ago, their steel long since recycled into other uses. But what they taught us remains, a legacy not of ships but of capability, not of vessels but of vision. The understanding that industrial democracies possess latent power that can be mobilized when necessity demands, that the seemingly impossible can become merely difficult through organization and determination, and that the lessons learned in one crisis can light the way through those that follow. This is why, a century later, we still study those plain, slow, coal-burning ships that taught America how to build vessels faster than enemies could sink them, and in doing so, wrote the first chapter of a story that would reach its climax 2 decades later, when Liberty ships by the hundreds would stream from American yards to carry the material of victory across every ocean. The standard ships were the prequel, the rehearsal, the first draft of a program that would help save the free world. And that is why their story matters still. If you found this deep dive into forgotten maritime history valuable, make sure you're subscribed because next week we're examining the secret behind the Kaiser shipyards, how a man who'd never built a ship before became the most prolific shipbuilder in history, and how the lessons of Hog Island were perfected on the shores of California and Oregon to create the production miracle of World War II. Until then, remember that every innovation we take for granted today was once impossible, until someone proved otherwise.